Picture this. You stand before a mirror, staring at the reflection that stares back. At first glance, it's familiar. The curve of your smile, the shape of your eyes, the way your hair falls across your forehead. But as you look closer, something feels off. The person in the glass seems like a stranger wearing your face, someone who has spent years molding themselves into shapes they were never meant to hold. Who is this person? And more importantly, where did you go? This is the hard truth. Somewhere along the way, you stopped being yourself. Not because you chose to, but because the world demanded it. From the moment you took your first breath, society began sculpting you, chiseling away at your edges, smoothing out your roughness until what remained was not you, but a version of you deemed acceptable by others. Fitting in became survival. Conforming became currency. But now, standing here in this quiet moment of confrontation, you can't help but wonder, what price have you paid for belonging? Let's begin with Anna, a woman whose story may feel uncomfortably close to home. By all outward appearances, she had built a life many would envy. A successful career in marketing, a cozy suburban house, 2 kids who adored her, and friends who called her the glue of their social circle. Yet beneath the surface lay an emptiness so profound it often left her breathless. She described it as feeling like a hollow shell, a vessel carrying everyone else's expectations, but none of her own dreams. Anna once loved sketching and designing lovely dresses, losing herself for hours in fabrics and stitches. But somewhere between college and adulthood, that passion faded into memory. Her sewing machine gathered dust in the attic, replaced by spreadsheets and PTA meetings. When asked why she stopped sewing, she shrugged and said softly, "There wasn't time." But deep down, she knew the real reason. Sketching and designing made her feel too much. It exposed parts of herself she'd been told weren't practical or professional. So she buried those parts, convincing herself that fitting into her roles as wife, mother, employee, and friend was enough. But was it? Was it truly enough? Now imagine David, a man navigating the labyrinth of corporate ambition. He climbed the ladder relentlessly, sacrificing weekends, hobbies, even relationships in pursuit of promotions and accolades. Success became his armor, shielding him from questions he didn't want to answer. Yet late at night, when the hum of fluorescent lights faded and silence filled his apartment, doubt crept in. Who was he outside the boardroom? What did he stand for beyond profit margins and quarterly reports? These questions gnawed at him, whispering truths he couldn't ignore. That somewhere along the way, he had traded authenticity for approval, identity for achievement. And then there's Maya, a young woman scrolling endlessly through Instagram, comparing her life to curated highlight reels of perfection. Her feed showed flawless vacations, enviable careers, picture-perfect relationships, all seemingly effortless. Meanwhile, her own reality felt messy, chaotic, unfinished. She tried to emulate what she saw, adopting trends, altering her appearance, curating posts designed to earn likes and validation. Yet each scroll left her feeling smaller, diminished, further from the person she wanted to be. Social media promised connection, but instead, it handed her a distorted mirror, one that reflected not who she was, but who she thought she should be. These stories are not isolated. They're reflections of a universal struggle. Each of these individuals carries a version of the same question. How do I reclaim myself after spending a lifetime fitting into molds that don't fit? How do I peel away the layers of expectation, obligation, and compromise to uncover the core of who I am? The paradox is maddening, yet undeniable. We spend our lives striving to belong, only to find that belonging comes at the cost of ourselves. Society teaches us early on that conformity equals safety, that blending in protects us from judgment, rejection, loneliness. But what if the opposite were true? What if the act of fitting in isolates us from our true selves, leaving us stranded in a sea of sameness? Consider the pressure to conform, not just externally, but internally. Think about the voices in your head, whispering doubts and fears, policing your thoughts and actions. Where did those voices come from? Were they always yours, or were they borrowed from parents, teachers, peers, culture itself? Over time, these borrowed narratives become indistinguishable from your own voice, steering your choices, shaping your identity, dictating your worth. Here's the unsettling truth. Identity isn't static. It's fluid, malleable, constantly reshaped by forces both seen and unseen. Every compliment you received as a child, every criticism you endured, every role you played, all of it contributed to the person you see in the mirror today. But how much of that person is truly you? How much is residue from lives you never lived, paths you never walked, dreams you abandoned before they could take flight? And yet, despite the weight of these questions, there remains a flicker of hope, a possibility that perhaps it's not too late. Perhaps the pieces of yourself you lost along the way aren't gone forever. Perhaps they're waiting, scattered fragments longing to be gathered, reassembled, reclaimed. So ask yourself, what would it mean to step away from the molds that shaped you? To stop asking for permission to exist as you are? To let go of the need to prove your worth to others? These are not easy questions. They demand courage, vulnerability, honesty. But they also hold within them the seeds of transformation. Before we proceed, pause for a moment. Look inward. Ask yourself, who am I beneath the roles I play, the masks I wear, the stories I tell? What parts of myself have I sacrificed in order to belong? And most importantly, are those sacrifices worth it? Why does fitting in feel so essential, yet leave us so empty? To answer this, we must journey into the depths of human psychology and societal conditioning, a labyrinth where identity is both forged and fractured. Here, conformity isn't merely an act of adaptation. It's a subtle erasure, a gradual stripping away of self until what remains is a reflection not of who you are, but of what others expect you to be. This process begins early, often before you're even aware of its existence, and continues throughout your life, shaping every decision, relationship, and aspiration. Imagine Carl Jung sitting across from you as your therapist. He might say that the root of this theft lies in the tension between the persona and the shadow. The persona, the mask we wear to navigate society, is necessary for functioning in a shared world. It allows us to connect, communicate, cooperate. But when overemphasized, it becomes suffocating, burying the shadow, the raw, unfiltered aspects of ourselves so deeply that we forget they exist. Jung would challenge you to ask, what parts of yourself have you exiled into the darkness? What desires, instincts, emotions have you deemed unacceptable, unworthy, or dangerous? Now picture Jean-Paul Sartre also leaning forward, cigarette smoke curling around his words. Hell, he declares, is other people. While his statement may seem harsh, it contains profound insight about the role of external judgment in shaping identity. From infancy, we learn to seek approval, to smile when praised, to shrink when criticized. These reactions harden into habits, forming neural pathways that reinforce the belief that our worth depends on others' validation. Over time, this dependency warps our sense of self, convincing us that authenticity is risky, vulnerability perilous, individuality isolating. But let's step out of abstract philosophy for a moment and ground ourselves in the tangible. Consider Lisa, a woman whose story mirrors countless others navigating the pressures of modern education. As a child, she excelled academically, earning top grades and accolades. Her parents beamed with pride, teachers lauded her potential, peers admired her dedication. Yet behind closed doors, Lisa felt like a fraud. She studied not out of passion, but obligation, driven by the fear of disappointing those who believed in her. By the time she graduated university, she had mastered the art of achievement, but at the cost of joy, curiosity, and purpose. Success became hollow, a performance devoid of meaning. Lisa's experience reflects a broader pattern. Society rewards conformity far more readily than individuality. Think about the systems we inhabit. Schools teach standardized curricula, workplaces demand uniform productivity, media celebrates homogenized beauty standards. Each institution reinforces the message that deviation comes with consequences, ridicule, rejection, failure. So we comply, silencing dissenting voices within ourselves, suppressing inclinations that don't align with prescribed norms. And yet, paradoxically, the very act of compliance breeds dissatisfaction. We achieve milestones only to find them lacking, acquire possessions only to feel emptier, fulfill roles only to lose touch with our essence. To understand how deeply ingrained this pattern is, consider the concept of cultural scripts, the invisible narratives that dictate behavior and belief. From an early age, we absorb these scripts through observation and imitation. Boys learn to suppress emotions labeled weak. Girls learn to prioritize relationships over ambition. Men are conditioned to equate success with dominance, women with nurturing. These scripts aren't inherently malicious. They stem from attempts to create order and cohesion, but they subtly constrain individual expression, forcing people into boxes too small to contain their complexity. Arthur Schopenhauer offers another lens through which to view this phenomenon. He argued that much of human suffering arises from the gap between desire and fulfillment. In the context of identity, this translates to the chasm between who we truly are and who we believe we should be. The masks we wear, the personas we adopt, become prisons, trapping us in cycles of striving and disappointment. Each attempt to meet societal expectations yields temporary satisfaction, followed by new demands, new pressures, new fears of inadequacy. Failure plunges us into shame, reinforcing the belief that authenticity is unsafe, conformity imperative. Let's return briefly to David, the corporate climber introduced earlier. His relentless pursuit of success stemmed not from personal ambition, but from societal prescription. Growing up, he watched his father endure grueling hours at work, sacrificing leisure and family for financial stability. Though his father rarely expressed regret, David internalized the lesson that providing materially equated to love emotionally. So he followed suit, climbing ladders built by others, chasing accolades meant to validate his worth. Yet beneath the surface lay a gnawing emptiness, a yearning for connection, creativity, freedom that no promotion could fill. Maya's struggle with social media highlights another dimension of this issue. Platforms designed to connect instead cultivate comparison, fostering envy, inadequacy, and fear of missing out, FOMO. Algorithms prioritize content that garners engagement, incentivizing users to present idealized versions of themselves. For Maya, scrolling became a form of self-policing, each post a referendum on her value. The more she compared herself to others, the further she drifted from her authentic self, mistaking curated perfection for genuine happiness. These stories underscore a vital truth. Identity theft doesn't happen overnight. It occurs incrementally, almost imperceptibly. Small compromises accumulate over time, eroding confidence, stifling creativity, dulling passion. The result is a fragmented self, pieced together from borrowed pieces, unable to recognize its own reflection. Yet perhaps the most insidious aspect of this theft is its ability to masquerade as virtue. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Nazi concentration camps and author of Man's Search for Meaning, observed that suffering ceases to have meaning when it becomes avoidable. Conformity convinces us that avoiding discomfort is noble, that playing it safe is prudent. But Frankl knew better. He saw firsthand how individuals could find purpose even amid unimaginable horror. For him, the antidote to conformity wasn't escape, but engagement, with life, with others, with the search for meaning. He might challenge you to ask, are you living authentically because it fulfills you? Or are you conforming because it protects you? At this point, you may feel the weight of these insights pressing down on you. You see how identity is stolen, not just externally, but internally. How cultural scripts, psychological conditioning, and philosophical paradigms conspire to shape who you become. But understanding why this happens is only half the battle. Knowing how identity is lost doesn't automatically restore it. The real question remains: how do we reclaim what has been taken? How do we excavate the buried fragments of ourselves and piece them back together? The answers lie in confronting the mechanisms that sustain conformity, the cognitive traps, emotional triggers, and societal scripts that keep it alive. Only by exposing these hidden forces can we begin to dismantle them. Before we proceed, take a moment to reflect. Which scripts govern your life? Which voices, internal or external, dictate your actions? And most importantly, are you ready to challenge them? Imagine walking through a museum, its halls lined with portraits. Each painting depicts someone smiling, poised, seemingly content. But as you draw closer, you notice cracks in the canvas, faint fissures that hint at something beneath the surface. You lean in further, peering through the gaps, and catch glimpses of turmoil, longing, uncertainty. These hidden layers are not flaws. They are fragments of truth, obscured by the polished veneer society demands we present. This is how conformity operates, not openly, but covertly, shaping our realities without us even realizing it. Conformity's power lies in its invisibility. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. Instead, it infiltrates quietly, slipping through cracks in our awareness until it becomes indistinguishable from reality. Cognitive biases, neurological wiring, and cultural conditioning act as silent architects, constructing a labyrinth of assumptions and reactions that keep us trapped. To escape, you must first learn to see the walls around you, to recognize the subtle forces that have been steering your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors all along. Let's begin with biases, those mental shortcuts that evolve to simplify decision-making but often lead us astray. Take the status quo bias, for instance, a tendency to prefer things staying the same rather than risking change. This bias convinces you that fitting in is safer than standing out, that deviating from societal norms invites chaos or rejection. Similarly, the bandwagon effect ensures that once a behavior or belief gains popularity, others follow suit, regardless of personal conviction. Every trend, every viral challenge, every social movement reinforces the narrative that belonging requires alignment. Over time, these skewed perceptions solidify into habits of thought that perpetuate conformity. These biases don't operate in isolation. They're amplified by neurochemical processes deep within your brain. Consider the reward system, which releases dopamine when you receive positive feedback, likes on social media, applause after a presentation, praise from authority figures. This neurochemical reinforcement creates a feedback loop, teaching you to seek external validation above all else. Your brain begins to associate approval with survival, rejection with peril. In moments of genuine connection or creative expression, this response can inspire growth. But when triggered repeatedly by superficial metrics of success, it creates a state of chronic dependency, leaving you perpetually chasing affirmation. Now zoom out further, beyond individual psychology, to examine the societal scripts that embed conformity into the collective consciousness. From childhood, we're taught to equate safety with compliance, success with external validation, happiness with material wealth. These narratives aren't inherently malicious. They stem from well-meaning attempts to guide us towards stability and prosperity. But they subtly reinforce fear-based living. Think about the education system, which rewards memorization over critical thinking, discouraging students from questioning established paradigms. Or consider corporate culture, where employees are pressured to meet quotas and climb ladders, sacrificing personal fulfillment for professional advancement. Even religion, at times, has played a role, using the promise of eternal salvation to enforce moral behavior. Each institution contributes to a shared mythology that equates deviation from the norm with peril. To illustrate this, let's revisit Anna, the woman whose passion for sketching and fashion designing faded into memory introduced earlier. Her reluctance to create stemmed not just from lack of time, but from a broader cultural script that equates productivity with purpose. Society bombards her with images of idealized ambition: entrepreneurs launching startups, executives leading teams, activists championing causes, all seemingly driven by measurable impact. Art, however, resists quantification. Its value lies in intangibles: emotion, expression, exploration. Yet because these qualities defy easy assessment, they're often dismissed as indulgent or impractical. For Anna, stepping back into her studio feels like entering a world that no longer values her voice. Fear convinces her that visibility equals vulnerability, solitude equals safety. David embodies another facet of this phenomenon. His relentless pursuit of corporate success reflects capitalism's relentless emphasis on accumulation and achievement. Economic systems condition us to view money not as a tool for exchange, but as a measure of worth. Saving becomes synonymous with security, spending with recklessness. David's fear of failure isn't merely personal. It's tied to a larger narrative that equates financial instability with failure and shame. So he stays tethered to his career trajectory, trading passion for predictability, convinced that playing it safe is the only responsible choice. And then there's Maya, whose struggle with social media highlights another dimension of this issue. Platforms designed to connect instead cultivate comparison, fostering envy, inadequacy, and fear of missing out, FOMO. For Maya, scrolling became a form of self-policing, each post a referendum on her value. The more she compared herself to others, the further she drifted from her authentic self, mistaking curated perfection for genuine happiness. But here's the paradox. While these forces shape our realities, they also obscure the truth about conformity, that it thrives on stagnation. Conformity gains strength when we avoid action, when we allow it to dictate our boundaries. The more we yield to its demands, the tighter its grip becomes. And yet, breaking free requires more than willpower alone. It demands a radical shift in perspective, an understanding that conformity is not the enemy, but a teacher, revealing the areas where growth is most needed. Aldous Huxley might frame this struggle differently. He argued that much of human suffering arises from the tyranny of thought, the incessant chatter of the mind that distorts reality and diminishes presence. Conformity, in this context, is the mechanism that keeps the chatter alive. It compels us to pursue goals while simultaneously warning us against the risks involved. Success brings fleeting satisfaction, followed by new fears of losing what we've gained. Failure plunges us into despair, reinforcing the belief that taking chances is inherently dangerous. Either way, conformity ensures that we remain trapped in its cycle. So how do we dismantle the structures that sustain conformity? How do we rewrite the scripts that limit our potential? The process begins with awareness, identifying the cognitive traps, neurological loops, and cultural narratives that keep us bound. But awareness alone is insufficient. We must also cultivate tools to challenge these forces, to rewire our brains and reshape our beliefs. Before we delve into those tools, pause for a moment. Reflect on the ways conformity has shaped your life. Which biases cloud your judgment? Which societal messages echo in your mind? And most importantly, are you willing to question them? Imagine standing before a towering sculpture, its surface smooth and polished, reflecting light in dazzling patterns. To the casual observer, it appears flawless, a masterpiece of symmetry and precision. But as you circle around it, you notice cracks running along its base, tiny fissures that hint at instability beneath the surface. One firm push, and the entire structure collapses, revealing raw stone underneath, rough, uneven, and unpolished, yet undeniably alive. This is the essence of reclaiming your identity. Not perfection, but authenticity. Not conformity, but courage. To break free from the molds that have shaped you requires more than awareness. It demands action, a deliberate dismantling of the walls that confine you. The process begins with a radical shift in perspective, seeing conformity not as an inevitability, but as a choice. Each time you comply with societal expectations out of fear or obligation, you reinforce the prison you inhabit. But each time you resist, to honor your truth, to embrace your uniqueness, you weaken its hold. Freedom lies not in escaping conformity altogether, for no one exists entirely outside society's influence, but in choosing consciously which parts to adopt and which to reject. Let's turn to Friedrich Nietzsche for guidance here. He famously declared, "Become who you are." At first glance, this statement seems paradoxical. If I am already myself, why must I become it? Yet Nietzsche understood something profound about identity, that it is not static but dynamic, constantly evolving through acts of will and self-discovery. Becoming who you are means shedding the layers of expectation imposed upon you, peeling back the masks you've worn, until what remains is the unfiltered core of your being. It is an ongoing process, requiring vigilance, vulnerability, and resolve. One powerful tool for initiating this transformation is voluntary discomfort, the practice of stepping outside your comfort zone to challenge ingrained habits and beliefs. Think of it as exposure therapy for the soul. Whether it's speaking up in a meeting despite your anxiety, pursuing a creative passion long abandoned, or simply saying no to something that drains your energy, these small acts of defiance accumulate over time, rewiring your brain to associate risk with possibility rather than peril. With each confrontation, conformity loses its power until eventually it becomes nothing more than a whisper in the wind. Consider Viktor Frankl's concept of tragic optimism, which teaches us to find meaning even in the face of suffering. Frankl believed that while we cannot always control our circumstances, we can choose our response to them. When conformity arises, not as external pressure, but as internalized belief, you lean into it. Ask yourself, what is this urge to conform trying to protect me from? What unmet need or unresolved wound might it be highlighting? By reframing conformity as a messenger rather than a menace, You transform it from a barrier into a bridge, a pathway to deeper self-awareness and growth. History offers countless examples of individuals who harness this mindset to reclaim their identities. Take Vincent van Gogh, whose art was dismissed during his lifetime as eccentric and unmarketable. Rather than succumbing to societal rejection, he embraced his outsider status, pouring his anguish and ecstasy onto canvas in bold, swirling strokes. His work now stands as a testament to the transformative power of authenticity. Or consider Rosa Parks, whose refusal to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus sparked a movement. Her act of defiance wasn't merely political, it was deeply personal, rooted in a commitment to live in alignment with her values, regardless of consequence. These figures remind us that breaking free from conformity is rarely easy, but it is always worth it. These historical examples demonstrate that reclaiming identity requires more than individual effort. It demands a fundamental reorientation of mindset. One powerful strategy for achieving this is reframing failure. Society conditions us to see failure as a verdict on our worth, a sign that we are inadequate or unworthy. Yet failure is merely feedback, a necessary detour on the road to mastery. Thomas Edison famously quipped, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." By adopting this perspective, you liberate yourself from the tyranny of perfectionism and open the door to experimentation, innovation, and eventual success. Another transformative mindset shift involves cultivating radical acceptance. Borrowed from Buddhist philosophy and modern psychotherapy, this practice invites you to acknowledge reality exactly as it is, not as you wish it to be. When conformity tempts you to suppress your true feelings or deny your desires, sit with them instead. Breathe into them. Allow yourself to feel their weight without judgment. Paradoxically, this act of surrender diminishes conformity's intensity, rendering it less overwhelming. As Aldous Huxley observed, the secret of life is to learn how to use pain as a catalyst for growth. Let's return briefly to Anna, the woman whose passion for sketching and fashion designing faded into memory. Instead of continuing to hide her tools, she begins sketching again, first in private, then sharing her work incrementally with trusted friends, and finally exhibiting pieces publicly. At first, the process feels excruciating. Every critique stings, every indifferent glance cuts deep. But slowly, she notices a shift. The more she exposes herself to vulnerability, the less terrifying it becomes. She learns to distinguish constructive criticism from baseless negativity, to celebrate progress over perfection. Over time, conformity no longer dictates her choices. It informs them, guiding her toward authenticity rather than avoidance. Similarly, David decides to approach his career differently. He starts small, incorporating creative projects into his daily routine, writing short essays, designing presentations with flair, mentoring junior colleagues. Each endeavor stretches his comfort zone, teaching him that fulfillment doesn't have to wait until retirement. He begins to see patterns in his behavior, recognizing how past wounds influence present decisions. Armed with this insight, he takes bolder steps, trusting that purpose is worth the risk. Though setbacks occur, they no longer derail him. Instead, they refine his understanding of what truly matters. Maya, too, finds her footing by challenging the societal script that equates validation with visibility. She joins online communities focused on meaningful connection rather than superficial metrics, volunteers for causes aligned with her values, and starts journaling, a practice she abandoned years ago. Through these activities, she reconnects with parts of herself long neglected, rediscovering joy and purpose. Conformity still visits occasionally, whispering doubts about her abilities or worth, but she greets it with compassion rather than resistance. In doing so, she transforms conformity from an adversary into an ally, using it to guide her toward authentic engagement with the world. These stories illustrate a crucial point. Freedom from conformity is not the absence of conformity, but the ability to move forward despite it. It is the courage to embrace uncertainty, to trust in your capacity to adapt and evolve. And it is the willingness to redefine success, not as the elimination of risk, but as the cultivation of resilience. As we prepare to unveil the final revelation, a paradigm shift so profound it will alter how you perceive reality. Take a moment to reflect. Which masks have you begun to shed? What tools will you carry forward on your journey? And most importantly, are you ready to step fully into the unknown? This is the final revelation, the truth that redefines everything. You are already whole. Not in the way society defines wholeness, not as someone who fits neatly into prescribed roles or meets arbitrary standards, but as someone who exists fully, unapologetically, authentically. Conformity operates on the lie that you are incomplete, that you must earn your place in the world by proving your worth. Yet here, in this moment of clarity, you see the truth. You belong not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Your existence itself is enough. To understand this fully, let's return to Jean-Paul Sartre, who argued that humans are condemned to be free. We are thrust into a universe devoid of inherent meaning, tasked with creating our own purpose through choices and actions. Conformity arises when we seek refuge from this responsibility, attempting to outsource our identity to external authorities, parents, peers, institutions. Yet, life itself is inherently uncertain, fluid, unpredictable. To deny this fundamental truth is to resist the very nature of being alive. When you embrace uncertainty instead of fearing it, you align yourself with the flow of existence, allowing life to unfold organically rather than forcing it into rigid molds. The practice of the Japanese art of kintsugi embodies a profound philosophy. Imperfection is not something to hide, but to celebrate. Every scar, every flaw tells a story of resilience, of survival, of growth. Applied to life, this perspective reframes conformity as a teacher, guiding you toward wholeness rather than fragmentation. Each moment of suppression becomes an opportunity to mend, to shine, to become more authentically yourself. Now picture Arthur Schopenhauer's pendulum swinging between desire and boredom. One moment pulling you toward ambition, the next leaving you adrift in emptiness. For much of your life, you may have believed this oscillation was inevitable, that dissatisfaction was an unavoidable facet of the human condition. But here's the deeper insight. The pendulum only moves because you keep pushing it. Desire stems from attachment to outcomes, identities, expectations. Let go of attachment, and the pendulum slows, eventually coming to rest in a state of equanimity. Conformity loses its grip because there is nothing left to protect, nothing left to prove. What remains is pure presence, the ability to inhabit each moment fully without clinging to the past or grasping for the future. This realization echoes the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, who reminds us that most of our suffering occurs in the mind, not in reality. We ruminate over events that haven't happened, replay scenarios that no longer exist, and project anxieties onto futures that may never arrive. Conformity thrives in this mental time travel, feeding off our resistance to the present. When you anchor yourself firmly in the now, conformity dissolves like mist under sunlight. You realize that the only thing you ever truly have is this moment, and within it lies infinite potential. Let's revisit Anna. After months of grappling with fear, she finally takes the leap, not recklessly, but with careful preparation and unwavering resolve. She sets aside evenings for her art, enrolls in workshops, and drafts a plan to exhibit her work. Along the way, challenges arise. Fashion shows reject her submissions. Critics dismiss her style. Customers hesitate to buy. Yet each obstacle feels less like a setback and more like a puzzle to solve. Why? Because Anna has shifted her focus from outcome to process. Success is no longer defined by accolades or sales, but by the joy of creating something meaningful, one stitch at a time. Even if her kind of designs never achieves widespread recognition, she knows she will emerge stronger, wiser, richer in experience. Conformity has transformed from a barrier into fuel, propelling her toward her vision. David undergoes a similar metamorphosis. No longer paralyzed by the specter of failure, he begins approaching his career with curiosity rather than desperation. He learns to listen deeply, to express himself honestly, to cherish purpose without clinging to it. Layoffs still sting, rejection still lingers, but they no longer define him. Instead, they remind him of his humanity, his capacity to adapt and grow. Conformity becomes a companion rather than a captor, nudging him toward authenticity rather than avoidance. And Maya? She discovers that validation is not a verdict handed down by others, but a choice she makes for herself. Her journal entries gain depth and honesty, reflecting not just her struggles but her triumphs, her questions, her dreams. Strangers stop her at community events to share how her words resonate with their own journeys. Young writers seek her guidance, inspired by her courage to pursue passion despite doubt. Conformity, once a shadow looming over her days, becomes a catalyst for reinvention, proving that creativity knows no expiration date. These transformations reveal a universal truth. Freedom from conformity is not about eradicating it, but transcending it. It's about seeing conformity for what it truly is, a construct of the mind, a projection of ego, a mirage obscuring the boundless landscape of possibility. When you stop running from discomfort and start embracing it, you unlock a level of consciousness few ever reach. You begin to live not as a passive observer of life, but as an active participant, shaping your reality with intention and grace. As Nietzsche might say, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Your why is the key to breaking free, not just from conformity, but from the limitations it imposes on your dreams, your relationships, your sense of self. Whether rooted in love, purpose, service, or curiosity, your why provides a compass, steering you toward fulfillment even in the face of adversity. With this clarity, conformity ceases to dictate your path. It becomes a guidepost, pointing you toward growth. So here we stand, at the culmination of this journey. The tools have been laid bare: voluntary discomfort, tragic optimism, radical acceptance, reframing failure, embracing imperfection, anchoring in the present. Together, they form a map. A blueprint for dismantling the prison conformity has built around you. But remember, maps are useless unless acted upon. The ultimate act of liberation is yours to claim. As the final chapter closes, I leave you with this cinematic image. You are standing once again at the edge of that desert, staring into the endless expanse. But this time, the wind carries no whispers of doubt, only the promise of discovery. Your legs no longer tremble, they ache to move forward. And as you take that first step into the unknown, you realize that the desert was never barren. It was filled with the infinite possibilities of who you could become. Go now. Step boldly. Live authentically.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope it was insightful and educative. If you like this video, do well to click like, share, and subscribe for more insightful videos like this. See you later. Bye.